when there's an election to win, we'll all be out campaigning.
And you feel maybe some people who are on the hard left, militants, revolutionary socialists, they're actually there for ideological purposes.
They're not fellow travellers in that sense, in terms of that clause 1 of the rule book, and in which case they do not belong in the Labour Party.
Today we are getting a second opinion from Gurinder Singh-Josan CBE. He is a member of the UK Labour Party's National Executive Committee, the governing body of the party. With the upcoming general election, pressure builds on political parties in rebuilding trust in politicians. Gurinder's played an instrumental role in reshaping the Labour Party, such as responding to the EHRC report through addressing anti-Semitism and building a more moderate voice. We explore with Gurinder close personal insights on who is Keir Starmer, the man who wants to be your Prime Minister, Labour's response to calls for a ceasefire in the Isreal-Hamas conflict, and his vision for Britain. To support our channel, please like and subscribe and check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, this is us getting a second opinion from Gurinder Singh-Josan. Hello Gurinder, it's very nice to have you on our podcast today.
Hi Hasnain, really good to be with you, and thank you for inviting me on.
No worries, thank you. We'll get straight into it. The general election is coming up. What are you predicting as a result for the upcoming general election?
I'm not much of a predictor on elections, and I've never really predicted. I like to think I spend more of my time trying to make it happen rather than predicting it. But in 2019, the result was really bad for us, and the challenge that we faced in 2019 is still the challenge today. Is a challenge that's never been met by any party ever before. So we've got to overturn a massive deficit to even get a majority of one. On the back of that, organisation wasn't great. Our finances weren't great in the last few years. Organisation, etc. Asked regional offices, staffing. So we've done a lot of things in the last few years to bring us to a point where actually we are in a shout of winning the next general election. Now, if you look at the polls, they tell you a story, and they'll tell you a story that we're heading for a massive win. I don't like polls because I think they lure you into a sense of false security, and certainly with the Labour Party, that's the risk for us at the moment. Because two things: number one, the polls don't really take account of all those people who are undecideds. What are they going to do? What are they going to decide? And when they walk into that polling booth on that day, and secondly, we do see a number of council by-elections every week. Every Thursday, there's council by-elections up and down the country. There's not a lot of them that were winning by the same level of majority that the polls would indicate, and those are real votes in real ballot boxes in that way. So I think the polls will tighten. I think I'm confident we will win the next general election. Keir Starmer will be the Prime Minister, and it will be a Labour government. I don't think the majority will be anywhere near some of the predictions, but I think it will be a decent majority. That means that Keir Starmer can get business through Parliament.
Would you say you and your other colleagues, senior colleagues in the Labour Party, also have that realism of it? Of course, the polls say 20 plus points on average for Labour Party at the general election, but that doesn't translate because it's first past the post system. Would you say you're all generally thinking like that you're confident but cautious?
I think the focus is on doing what we know what we've got to do to get to win the next general election, and it's basically getting all that work done. So where there is candidate selection, where there is fundraising, where there is employing staff and in the right places, all those kind of things. Is the focus is so heavily on getting all those things done. Our policy offer, the manifesto, all these things are so crucial to the victory. So people, we haven't got to this stage by accident after 2019. It's because a lot of people have done a lot of hard work to get to this stage, and some difficult decisions being made over the last few years, and some challenging circumstances we've had to go through. But we're here because people are really focused on it. So, yeah, and you can only do that by being grounded in the reality of the situation.
I was going to talk about the seats. So Labour, if I'm correct, has 202 seats now, and you need 326 to have a majority. Sir Tony Blair in 1997, he won 146 seats, and I think Keir would need to win 120, 130 odd seats. So that is ambitious. So I think a realistic question to ask you would be coalition government. Would the Labour Party form a coalition with the Liberal Democrats if they had to?
Labour Party going into to win this election. We're not going into form a coalition. We're not planning for that. We're not entertaining it. Our target is to win the general election on our own terms, on our own policy manifesto, and with our candidates. I think one thing I'm sure about is that there is a growing wind out there. People want change, and they want change, not just some of the things which the Tories over the last few years have got up to, some of the sleaze, some of the the Partygate, all those kind of things, but also they want a kind of politics where people actually grapple with some of the difficult decisions. There's integrity behind it, but people grapple with the difficult things that need to be done, and are able to make those decisions and deliver that. What you have with Keir Starmer, you've got somebody who doesn't come from a political background. He's actually run. He's actually had a real job outside of politics and run the CPS. He brings a level of integrity which we haven't seen, certainly with this Tory party at all. His commitment to step down at the time of COVID when that inquiry was launched into that meeting, and he said, "Look, if I'm charged, I will step down." And you wouldn't get any Tories saying that, and so that level of integrity is really important. I think we've still got a job of work to do in terms of defining and explaining our policy offer, and in a way that's really understandable. So in 2019 we had a great manifesto, but there was just too much in there, and we weren't able to get across to people in a really simple, understandable way what was going to change after the general election. And you talk about 1997, we had a pledge card with 5 pledges, and it was simple. Everybody knew what they were. So some of it's about having the right policies, but some of it's also about the presentation as well. If we get all that right, then I'm confident we'll have an outright majority.
If you get that messaging right, okay. I'm only going to push maybe one more time, but it is a lot of seats to gain. Is it something? I understand you are campaigning for a result where you achieve all your missions, and I do want to go through each of the missions with you, but I think you're right. People do want change. People are looking for trust in politics. But if let's say the Lib Dems, and I know a lesser result for the Labour Party would be a coalition with the SNP, but if they're talking about building trust in politics, a change, social progression, if let's say you didn't need to compromise on too many things or too many of your missions or policies, is that something realistic you would consider, especially as a party that's preparing to go into government no matter what?
I think the Labour Party will lay out a really clear framework of what our policy manifesto is, and some of that is happening already. So the missions are there, and we've had the national policy framework has gone through a number of years, and we've come up with a document which trade unions are happy with. Everybody signed off, and eventually all that will get translated into one manifesto. But a lot of policies are being defined all the time by the Labour Party, and the question is so the challenge for us is to make sure that people understand what that policy offer is, to be realistic, not to raise undeliverable hopes, but to be realistic with what we can deliver. Now, in those circumstances, and with a leadership that has integrity, I think people will go with that. I don't think people will be looking for any other alternative. And some of that is reflected in the polls as well. We're seeing
What's reflected as in wanting trust?
in terms of the Lib Dems. So the Tories are doing really badly in the polls.
Yes.
Labour's doing well, but the Lib Dems aren't doing that well. The Greens are there as well.
Lib Dems have won some by-election seats. I was only saying because, from my understanding, it seems the Labour and Lib Dem are campaigning in different areas. So Labour maybe are trying to win back a lot of those, the red wall seats that they lost. Lib Dems are trying to take more of the south seats or the rural areas in those communities, which Labour are not going for. And in the by-election results, those in like the south of the country have gone Lib Dem. I don't know if that was targeted voting just because Lib Dems were the second largest party, but it seems you're campaigning in different areas.
So we've seen a shift in the Labour Party. So my view has always been clear that everybody in the UK should have the opportunity to vote for a Labour candidate in every election. And so and that isn't down to the voters, that's down to us. We have to be organised, we have to have the candidates, we have to have the resources to make that happen. And we haven't always done that. Yeah, we have in the past left areas to other parties to capitalise on, and we've not, we haven't done as well as we should have done in those areas. We've had by-elections even in this Parliament where the Labour Party hasn't resourced them. We resourced some by-elections more than others, and the expectation is the Lib Dems or somebody else, the Lib Dems would pick up on them. Yeah, but there's been a very real shift in the Labour Party in, I would say, the last 2 years, and every single by-election in the last 2 years we have resourced to its fullest. I do not accept that there are Lib Dem seats that Labour can't win. I do not accept that at all. And so, for example, Mid-Bedfordshire.
Yes.
Mid-Bedfordshire, Lib Dems ran a really strong campaign trying to pitch themselves as the natural party to win it, which was diabolical because they weren't. Labour has always come second there. Yeah. But in the past, we would have, because we had the by-elections on the same day, we could, actually, let's leave that to them, let's focus on the other one. We didn't do that. We put our resources into both the by-elections on that same day, and we won both of them. Yeah. So I think there's been a real change in the Labour Party. We're not looking for coalitions. We want to be really clear. This is the Labour Party, this is the leadership, these are our candidates, and this is our policy offer. That's what you vote for. And if we get that right, people don't need to look elsewhere.
Interesting. So let's talk about the campaign then. What do you see as the greatest challenges to meeting that magical 326 number?
So, we've had a number of things. One of the things we're getting ahead of now is candidate selection. So pretty much all of our battleground seats are selected. We're making good progress on some of the more difficult seats. And certainly in the next couple of months, most of those candidates will be in place. So that's a good place to be in. There's always lessons to be learned and how we can next time do it even quicker and more smoother. And we'll certainly learn those lessons. When I came on the NEC in 2004, we had a £5 million deficit in that year.
Wow.
And we had, in our general election fund, we had zero.
Okay.
So we had to make...
For the 2005 general election?
In 2000 I came on.
2000.
So when I came on the NEC in 2000, we had a £5 million deficit with zero in our general election fund.
Okay.
And so we had to make some difficult decisions in terms of cutting back expenditure, knowing that we got a general election within 4 years at that point. And yet we had to stabilise our finances, start bringing more income in, and also, sort out our organisation. So that means our regional offices, our staffing, a whole host of things. So there have been some real challenges with that, yeah. But we dealt with them. So in terms of fundraising, we're doing well.
Okay.
Yeah. will always be, the Tories will always raise more funding than us. There's no doubt about that. But we are doing well in terms of fundraising now. So we were able to deal with that £5 million deficit. We had to scale back staff across the party. We dealt with the deficit. We started getting money in. We started staffing up our offices again, and we're now, in a place where we're in a good place on that. Candidate selection we talked about, the policy offer. The nature of the Labour Party is, we have our members, we have our affiliates as well. The trade unions are so important in the Labour Party, and we can't, our policy offer has to take into account the views of our trade union. They have to buy up to it. They have to be part of that, and that is always difficult, and some difficult conversation to have to take place. But we've done that. And we're in a good place on that as well. So, some of the policies are being rolled out. We're in due course, when the election called, the manifesto will be put together and published. So that's been a real challenge. The challenges around the culture of the party. So, for example, the anti-Semitism has been a big issue in the last few years. I came, when I was elected to the NEC in 2000, one of my earliest commitments was to deal with anti-Semitism, because that is fundamentally, we're a party of equalities and stuff, and we can't, we can't have discrimination of any kind in the Labour Party at all. So dealing with that has been important, and it's something which Keir Starmer made a key priority from his very first speech he made when he was elected leader, and all the way through. We had the EHRC report and then damning findings of that. We had the Ford report. We've had a whole number of recommendations from both of those, which we put into place. We've now got a complaint system, which is probably the best in any political party. Well, it is the best in any political party, and I can say that I chair the Complaint and Disciplinary Committee on the NEC.
You do. Yes.
So I've seen all this close up. I've seen, we had a backlog of over 7,500 complaints not dealt with.
Not necessarily on anti-Semitism, but just general complaints.
A lot of them were anti-Semitism, but a lot of other stuff as well. Okay. Just not dealt with, just sitting there.
Was that in 2019?
In 2000. 2000. I was elected to the NEC first time, same time Keir was elected leader. And when we started looking, that's one of the things we found. So we put the staffing in, the resources in. We dealt with that. Yeah. We've had a backlog of people's cases, people who've been suspended for years and years and years, not dealt with. We're dealing with that. We brought independent processes into our complaint system, and they're working really well. As part of that process, we prescribed certain organisations whose values do not align with the Labour Party, and this is, this goes to the fundamental core of what the Labour Party is. Clause 1 of the Labour Party's rule book is absolutely clear. The Labour Party exists to maintain an elected presence within the democratic structures and within Parliament in the UK. That's what the party is about. And yet we had people who were revolutionary socialists who thought the Labour Party was a home for them, organising for their own organisation, not for the Labour Party. Well, we prescribed organisations, and as a result of that, we expelled people who were supporters of those organisations, and that was absolutely the right thing to do. I have no regrets about that. It was absolutely the right thing to do, because we had to bring the Labour Party back to a position where it's electable again, and that's one of the decisions we had to make. The whole culture around, so Islamophobia is talked about a lot, other forms of racism, anti-black racism and stuff. So we brought in code of conduct on, we had anti-Semitism code of conduct already, but we brought in Islamophobia code of conduct, an anti-black racism and Afrophobia code of conduct. We've rolled out training on anti-black racism, on anti-Semitism, and now we're starting to do that on anti-black racism, Afrophobia as well. The whole way we're dealing with process. So I sit on dispute panels, and we now see whereas we had a backlog going back years, we're now getting cases coming to panels within 2 to 3 months of being reported to the party. So there's been massive progress. Yeah, and in the longer term, I'd well, not even long. In the medium term, we're spending a lot of money on dysfunction in the Labour Party, and we've had to do that because of where we ended up. But I'd like to see, so part of the recommendations of the EHRC report was about, and to some extent Ford as well, was about a new code of conduct, and it's about changing the culture within the party. So it's about challenging. Everybody should be in a position to challenge discrimination or racism of any kind, whenever it happens, should know how to go about doing that, should have the confidence to do that. And actually, people who are racist and Islamophobes and anti-Semites shouldn't be in the Labour Party in the first place. They shouldn't think they've got a space here. Yeah. And so that new code of conduct we put in place, that change of culture, I'm confident we can deliver that. If we deliver that, then over time we should be able to roll back some of these structures so that then we're not spending as much on them, but we're actually in a much better place because we're not getting the same level of complaints in the first place.
I do like your honesty, Gurinder, and I've heard you give speeches about this, and it's very here to hear this fully. You're very open about the challenges that had been in the Labour Party, what was inherited in 2019. And even, let's say, non-Labour Party members, but Labour voters, even if they were questioning about voting Labour, but everyone wanted a strong Labour Party or a strong opposition party so that we genuinely have 2 votes, when it comes to a general election. It almost feels like, when you describe this, that it feels that it was a 10-year mission maybe from when in 2019 the general election, because of how many seats you were so far down, to then what was to be achieved probably was like it needed 10 years to actually change the party, then win the election. But now you're having to do all of that in 5 years just because the Tories or Conservatives are not doing very well in the polls. But I do like your honesty about it, and some would say you actually just saying this, and let's say we keep on talking about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, that still has a negative image about the party, that it seems like you're still having to work on it. It's not a unresolved issue. And I've always found you like a very hard-working person, and I know you've been very busy trying to organise those things.
So look, it's the Labour Party is a reflection of society, and unfortunately discrimination and racism exists in society, and it's inevitable some of that will come into the Labour Party, but the Labour Party has to be strong enough and robust enough to withstand that and deal with it. Now there was a time when we didn't deal with it. When more people who had anti-Semitic views felt they had a home in the Labour Party, who shouldn't have felt they had a home in the Labour Party in the first place, and then the Labour Party didn't deal with it. So we knew we had to fix that. So partly it's about saying, actually, you don't have a place in the Labour Party. You don't have a place in society, but certainly not in the Labour Party. And if you are in the Labour Party and you do express those views or those action, then we are going to take action, and we got processes to deal with that. So we knew we had to deal with that from day one. And these are the things about. This isn't even about being in a better place electorally. This is morally about what is it we believe in, and if this is the party that brought in the Equality Act 2010 and many other legislations over the years. We're the party of equalities, and yet this was happening in the Labour Party, and to me that was just absolutely wrong, and we shouldn't stand for it. So we have to deal with it.
And you were more prepared to deal with that situation. And I'm not saying necessarily compromise on winning elections, but you felt like that was needed to be resolved.
That was needed to be resolved because morally it's about who we are and what the Labour Party is, about what our values are.
Yeah.
But if we didn't resolve it, you can forget about the winning election because people are looking at us. You know, we're not hidden away. If the EHRC published a report, it's out in the public domain. You know, if they found us guilty of discriminatory acts, then that's in the public. You know, we can't hide from that. So we have to deal with it, not just because of the electoral impact, but because morally it's about who we are and what we are. And you know, the whole change is difficult at the best of time, but in 2019 people talked about the scale of the challenge was a 2-term challenge,
which I tried to say earlier.
I never bought into that, and I never bought into that because we couldn't allow it to be a 2-term challenge. And we've seen the damage the Tories have done to the economy, to working people in this country in just this last 4 years. It's just massive. Now imagine they have another 5 years to continue that. You know, who knows who's going to be the next leader? Is Liz Truss coming back? And you know, the damage that the right wing of the Conservative Party is hell bent on bringing to bear in this country. We can't allow that. So the challenge for us was always, we have to be in a position to win the next general election whenever it came. But to do that, we've got to deal with a lot of stuff.
Okay.
You know, and we had to deal with it. Yeah. I worked out a couple of weeks ago. I've done 96 dispute panels.
Okay.
I've been on the NEC. I will find a way of working out how many cases, but I'm sure it's in the thousands. You know, and other NEC members have done similar. Yeah, and that's about putting the time in. It's about being very clear what we're trying to achieve. It's about putting the processes, the policies, the framework, the rules in place to achieve that, and then delivering it as well. Now, a lot of this stuff is done behind the scenes. It's not published. It's not publicised, but it's been done. And one of the other things I've always been very persistent about ever since I joined the NEC is about increasing transparency in the Labour Party. And you know, so politics is, you know, we're a political party and politics exists, you know, in the Labour Party. Of course it does, yeah. But some of these things should be above that. And you know, that thing about, you know, sunlight being the best disinfectant, you know, actually there's some truth to that. And if we can show that, actually open the doors on some of these things, and actually this is what we're doing, this is what we're facing, this is what we're doing about it, and these are the numbers and the data to go with it, I think we're actually in a better position, because that allows people to hold us to account. It allows us ourselves to hold us to account as well, And so what we have been doing, and part of this was a recommendation in the EHRC report as well, but it's something I've been pushing ever since I joined the NEC, was publishing more data around this. So now every complaint and disciplinary committee meeting, we get reports with lots of data, and a lot of that data then is published on the party website straight after, so people can see what we're dealing with. And things like, you know, what proportion of the complaints are anti-Semitism, what proportion are Islamophobia, what proportions are homophobia, etc. You know, and what are the sanctions in each case is, what proportion expulsions and no further actions, and the whole thing in between, to see whether what we're doing stands up to scrutiny. You know, if it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, then I'm not happy with it. Yeah. It's because some of these things are fundamental about our values and about doing the right thing.
Okay. Do you feel the party has changed enough to actually genuinely compete then to be in government? Or I guess, how does the changes that you've put in then actually allow you to start thinking about, okay, but we've sorted ourselves out, but we actually need to convince people to vote for Labour? How does that all tie in together?
No, absolutely. So, you know, the party had changed. It had changed more than enough. Yeah. change is something we should never shy away from. So change is an ongoing. Society changes, so we have to change to reflect society, and we shouldn't shy away from that. The changes we needed to bring some of them were so fundamental in this case. On the doorstep now, we're not having the same negative conversations about our leader that we were prior to 2019 and 2017. That fundamentally says a lot, and that is about the integrity we spoke about, but it's also about some of the policy positions. And it's about some of the realism about the challenges ahead, and it's about all those things coming together. Now, there are people when you're out on the doorstep. There are a lot of people who are Labour voters who are very happy. There are some who have gripes about particular policy issues. There are Tory voters who are not voting Tory again. Some of them saying they're not voting at all, but people are coming across to us. And we need to do. We need to find more of those. We need to have more of those conversations to bring more of them over to us. But that is only happening because the change has happened.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about Labour's prospects then for the general election. So I was looking on the party website. You've got missions for government, and I think it's good to see that parties are now presenting as missions, not just Labour, but also Conservatives and others, because it's hard to maybe stick to a specific policy, but you say this is the direction we want to go. So highest G7 growth, future of the NHS, achieving shortening of the waiting list, opportunity for all, safer streets, and clean energy and superpower. What would you say is the vision for the Labour Party coming into this general election? What do you want to achieve? What is making you different compared to other parties?
So I think it goes back to so what essentially makes us different is when the Labour Party talks about those missions or that policy offer generally, who are the people we're looking to make change for? Fundamentally it's about that, and it's about there are people who are suffering with the cost of living. There are people who Brexit has a role in this. Is employment ain't great at the moment, and the figures may show employment's really high, but some of that is things like 0 hours contracts and people working 2 or 3 jobs and still not being able to make ends meet. This is about doing the right thing for the whole cross section of our society. And sometimes the decisions the Tories make are focused on giving advantage to certain people at the top of the ladder or on higher incomes and things. What the Labour Party is essentially about is about broadening that across the whole remit. So even if you are on benefits, you should. The approach of the Labour Party should be: we are still going to help you even more. If you are if you're a small business owner, if you're if you're employed, if you're a manager, if you're managerial roles, CEO, whatever, it's about across the piece being able to do the right thing by everyone. Now that isn't easy to do, but it's about the intent is important. If you don't start off with that intent, if you're constantly demonising people on benefits, then you certainly don't have an intent to help them. Okay. And that's the challenge. Is this is for me. Blair did well because Blair and Brown did well because they understood the importance of having a partnership between business and public sector, private sector and public sector. And it's that it's about understanding those things, which you can read dozens of books on socialism and all kinds of topics, which will say, oh no, this is terrible, you can't do this. But it's about being realistic about what's important and about what's deliverable and how you deliver deliver these things. And in that context, it's about having the broadest outlook and forming the broadest possible partnership to deliver change that will benefit all of the UK.
Okay. But that's hard to achieve when, of course, as you had alluded to earlier, there isn't any money necessarily to spend. The Labour Party has, I'm going to use U-turn on some of their policies, such as not ending privatisation, but cutting down privatisation. That is kind of scaled back. In terms of the green targets that the Labour Party had, that has been scaled back. So then, do you still feel you're able to achieve to a broad sense of people, even though there isn't necessarily money, in government? What do you think can realistically be achieved with the economic situation that we have now?
So I think we can still achieve a lot.
You think so?
Part of this is, so we know there's limited new pots of money that you can go to, yeah. Yes. But actually, government spends a lot of money anyway, and it's about focusing that. So Rwanda, yeah. We know the government has spent millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions on this. Never going to achieve anything. Yeah. But the issue about immigration still has to be dealt with, and the issue about small boats still has to be dealt with. Yeah. So do you carry on spending money on something that isn't going to achieve anything, or do you say, actually, we're going to make a decision, this isn't going to work, we're going to do something different? And this is about choices. Yeah. And part of the issue, part of the challenge is getting people in positions of power who are going to make those choices, who are going to make the right choices. And that's the thing, is nobody can predict when Keir Starmer goes into number 10, when our secretaries of state go into their department, what are those first reports that are going to be put in front of them? Yeah, what are those first challenges? What are those first decisions that they're going to have to make? We don't know those. Yeah, what we do know though is the approach they will take and the values they bring to it. And I am confident that a Labour government led by Keir Starmer with the shadow team he's got are the right people to make those choices for the broadest cross section of people. Now, not everything's going to be fixed overnight. That's not going to happen. And some of these are longer term challenges which are going to take more than one parliament to fix. But the challenge for the Labour Party and for a Labour government is going to be, once they're elected, I think they will have a very short honeymoon period. But in that time, they've got to convince the people out there that their approach to this and their intent and what they are doing is the right thing, and people need to hold faith with it.
One thing that Labour Party generally gets accused of, mostly by Conservative, is they are very much a tax-based government, or they're very focused on taxes and money is an issue. But I guess, how can you break out of that mold, or what can you tell us today that actually the Labour Party is not part of that, that you are, as you say, a socially progressive country that you want to achieve for better opportunities for people? What are your grander ideas and that perspective?
So, I think so part of this is about looking at the history of the Labour Party when we have been in government and what we've actually done. And part of it's about listening to what they're actually saying. So, Rachel Reeves is very clear about what our fiscal rules are, and that's it. We're not going to breach those, which is a similar approach that Gordon Brown took prior to 1997. And, we stuck to it. We stuck to those commitments. Part of it is about, not everything is about tax, but it's about, Labour's engagement with the business community is being, it's ratcheted up a lot in the last 6 months, year. And the support we're getting from, captains of industry, people in business, people who have their own businesses, small business owners, etc., is really increasing massively. And there are engagement events being held all the time now, every week that there are events up and down the country with our shadow team and business owners and business people. And the conversations that are taking place aren't just around tax, they're around legislation, they're around HR rules, they're about type of contract, they're about being able to export easier, all kinds of things. And so the tax thing is something which some element of the press will throw at us because it's an easy thing to throw at us. But the reality is very different, and that reality is borne out through our through history. You just look at the 1997 government and Tony Blair and Brown and what they did and how they dealt with this. And you look at what our front bench is saying now is very different to what to that narrative.
And do you feel that the current government, the Conservative government, has not actually capitalised on those business opportunities? I guess I'm just trying to figure out what differences there are between Labour and Conservatives on that.
So I think the challenge for the Conservative government is very different in the sense that they are. The membership of the Conservative Party has drifted very much more right wing.
But isn't that pro-business, more capitalism?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Because you talk to business people, they want to remove barriers to trade with our European partners. Now, everything this government has done has been in the opposite direction.
To separate from EU and not EU necessarily, but European relationships.
Yeah. And there's nothing that they can offer, and whole raft of industries, agriculture, farming, fisheries, our industries. It's the same story across the board. Is Brexit was brought in as an ideological thing by the right wing, who pushed the Tory party into that position. Those people have more or less lock, stock and barrel taken up residence in the Tory party. That's pushed them more right wing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't hear anything from this government about what they're doing to change that and make things better. And it's not just about hearing it, it's about what are they doing. They're the ones in power. They have been in power for 14 years.
Okay.
We should never forget that. They've been in power for 14 years. The situation of this country now is entirely and utterly their fault. It's down to the decisions they have made and the short-termism and their blinkered ideological approach to these things.
Before Tony Blair, do you know who was the last Labour Prime Minister to actually last more than one term?
So Tony Blair was the only one to win more than one election.
Exactly. So that was my question: is how is this different to any other Labour government coming in? So
this is one of the challenges for the Labour Party. I actually wrote about this in December. Okay. And the Tory party seem to have this in their DNA that they are the natural party of government. And we don't have that in the Labour Party. And part of this is about us changing the culture in the Labour Party. And one of the questions I asked in that piece I wrote back then was, is it too early to start talking about a second-term Labour government? What are the challenges? Because with these things, you've got to have short-term solutions to some problem, but some longer-term solutions as well. So internally, in terms of the Labour Party, what does that mean? Well, it means looking at, okay, what is our staffing profile going to look like over the course of the government and going into the next general election? What is our fundraising strategy over the course of that? We win a general election and, right, great, we're done. But actually, that's only, there's more to come.
Especially when you campaign, a lot of it is 10-year policies. And you're being honest today saying first year, it'll take time for things to progress. So, yeah. It's about that challenge. Okay. And part of that is about culture within the Labour Party. It's about us saying, actually, we should be the default party of government. Why shouldn't we be? Partly it's about culture. Partly it's about the way we're organised and the way we're set up and stuff. And the way we do things, and part of it's the policy stuff as well.
But I absolutely think it's the right question. It's the question we should be asking more of, and it's the question we should be talking about more of, because we don't do it enough. And if we don't do it, we're not going to have that culture change that's going to let us.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it is somewhat suspected that Labour are going to be in government in whatever capacity. But, you know, what can really be achieved in 5 years at the end of the day? Like, do you need, you know, long-term strategy? When you mean culture, what do you mean by that? Is that just impression of Labour Party members not even understanding how it is to feel to be in government for that long? Is it factionalism within the party? Is it a lack of unity towards a common goal of we're in government, we get to do things at the end of the day? And what culture challenges are there in the Labour Party for, let's say, lasting more than one term?
Yeah, so I think partly, I mean, in terms of culture, it's about firstly wanting to be in government.
Do you feel a lot of Labour Party members don't want to be in government, or not necessarily thinking about that?
I think some of those people who joined after 2015 didn't want to be in. They wanted to use the party as a vehicle to other ends. Yeah, I think a lot of them aren't in the Labour Party now. I think there are people who, you know, once we start making difficult decisions, some people will say, well, actually, why are we even bothering? You know, Labour government's no better than the Tory government. Yeah. They will say that. They're saying that now. You know, and we're not even in government yet. And it's that mindset that needs to change, that actually being in government, what does that mean? And you're right, you know, a lot of our members have never experienced that. They don't know what it's about. Yeah. One of my I think in '97 conference, I spoke. We had a debate at annual conference on the national minimum wage, and I got to speak in that. Yeah, and then a few months later, we were bringing legislation in to put in place a national minimum wage. Yeah,
amazing. And
yeah, you know, good people go to conference every year making speeches about things they want to see happen. But if you're not in government, it ain't going to happen. Yeah. And that feeling, actually going to conference, making a speech on a topic, and seeing it come to fruition and changing people's lives is great. And that's where we want to be. But it's that understanding that actually we can do this and we should be doing this.
With the poll numbers, is the Conservative Party losing the election, or is Labour winning the election? I say that because I think there is an anti-Tory vote out there, but I somewhat question, is there a pro-Labour vote out there at the end of the day? With Tony Blair winning the 1997 election, it was a very big pro-Labour vote as well as an anti-Margaret Thatcher vote. I don't know if we're necessarily getting a pro-Labour vote. Is that a good judgment or, you know, understanding of that?
I think we are. I think we need to do more. Okay. So there is definitely an anti-Tory vote out there, and people who voted Tory in 2019, a lot of them aren't going to next time. But we also know we have to give a positive alternative as well, a positive offer for people to vote for. Yeah. And, you know, as I said before, that part of that's about our leadership, it's about candidates, but it's all about policy and stuff as well. So we've got more to do on that. Yeah. And once the general election called, we will put in place a manifesto. I'm confident we will have much better presentation this time and be able to explain that and be able to put it across so it's much more easily understood this time round. So we do have to do that. I think the challenge for us is that in some places, say some of the red wall seats, there are people who have generation after generation voted Labour, and suddenly 2019, maybe even before that, they didn't vote Labour. We lost their trust. Now rebuilding trust is hard. Yeah, rebuilding trust isn't easy to do, and it's about. Some of it's about the policy and stuff, but a lot of it is about how our relationship with people as well. And, you know, I always say we need to be talking to people constantly. We might not have the answer they want, we might not have the answer they're looking for, but the fact that we're talking to them and we're in communication, we're engaging with them, and if they go into that polling booth and they've got the pencil in their hand and they're thinking, well, actually, I'm not happy with that lot, but okay, they're not giving me exactly what I want, but at least they're listening to me. That's part of the challenge. And it's that communication. Sometimes we lose our way on that as well.
What you presented to me sounds very trustworthy, seems very humble and nice. But then the question is that ambitious? Is that, bold? And is that actually maybe what people want to be looking for? Like Tony Blair was very ambitious and bold and said, this is the vision. And everyone knew what New Labour was. That's maybe what some people question about Labour is, are they ambitious? And that's why they don't know what they're voting for.
No, so look, the policy office is ambitious. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, and some of the stuff which will come out in the manifesto will be very ambitious and will be very bold. I've no doubts about that at all. The point I'm making is as well as having that, we've also got to win people's trust as well. And trust isn't just about policy, isn't just about the leadership. It's about relationship, and you have to build that, and that comes over time. And one of the changes we have brought is, so when we go out canvassing, the questions we ask, the conversations we have, the data we're collecting, we've changed that now. So we've got the persuasion pathways way of doing canvassing now, much more detailed conversations compared to what we were doing before. And those changes are really important because it's about rebuilding that trust and that confidence with people. I think back to when the BNP got councillors elected in different parts of the country, they were invariably in places in Labour stronghold areas. Yeah. And why did they get elected? They got elected because Labour parties in those areas stopped doing what they should be doing. Labour councillors stopped doing what they should be doing. Local Labour parties stopped engaging in that way, and it's that communication, that relationship. You have to have that with your communities. If you don't have that, then there's no reason for them to even believe a bold policy offer. Those relationships are so important.
I think for the upcoming general election, a lot of people don't know too much about Keir Starmer. They do hear about his background. You're very unique, and I'm very humbled to be here. You are on the Labour Party National Executive Committee. You have had many interactions with Keir Starmer, as well as senior colleagues who've interacted with him. Who is Keir Starmer? Can you just tell us, just to get a grasp of how he is as a person?
So Keir... Okay, so what I see of Keir, which other people don't. So on the NEC, he attends every full NEC to give a report, a leader's report, and he will talk about a lot of the issues going on currently, and the stuff he's doing, etc. But he'll also get lots of questions, and some of them are really challenging questions, and some of them, are very robust. And what I find is he makes a note of every single one, and he answers every single one. And he does it in a way which is very measured, and even something which is really robustly asked to him, he will answer it with respect and politeness, but he'll give a good answer on everything. And if he doesn't know something, he'll say that, and he'll say we'll come back to you on that. I think this is a man with lots of personal integrity and strong values, and we've seen that out with some of the decisions he's made. I think he's committed to winning, and he's committed to making change, because he sees the unfairness in society and the struggles people are facing. And I think he, coming from the background he come from working class background, he sees that more than some of our other, some of the people in power at the moment. So he sees that very closely. So I think he's somebody who's very in touch, I think he's very much about detail as well as about the strategy and stuff, but he also gets the detail on a lot of stuff as well.
Okay, how would you describe him then dealing with challenges? I do want to just get a feeling about who he is and his mannerisms. He's dealt with lots of things in the Labour Party, whether that's anti-Semitism, whether that's candidate selections in Rochdale, and needing to ask Labour members of Parliament and suspending them. How does he go about his day-to-day dealing with that very stressful scenario? But then you also see him on Instagram, being an Arsenal fan and loving how they're doing well in the Premier League. I guess, how does he balance all that? How is his mannerism?
So first thing to understand is, not all of that is he doesn't do all of that by himself.
Of course,
so,
yes.
The party structure, this stuff is set up to support a lot of those functions. So, for example, MP being suspended, that's not directly his decision.
Yeah.
So if it's a complaint or dispute to the party, there are processes that would decide on a suspension if it's warranted or not. That doesn't involve the leader. If it's suspending from the chief whip, that's the chief whip's decision. Yeah. So not all of that is directly his remit. And even where it is, he has support mechanisms in place to help him, to support him with that. But the thing he provides is very clear direction. So on the anti-Semitism stuff, he was very clear from day one he wanted to deal with it, and very robustly, and nobody was under any misapprehension we were going to deal with this.
And even then, let's say someone else would have led on it, or you were head of the complaints committee for dealing with that. But I guess in terms of his leadership, how would he go about supporting NEC members to address the biggest issues in the Labour Party? How would he go about managing all that?
So on the big issues, he'll be present, and he'll often have his say, and he'll be clear what he believes on those things. Yeah. Now, the NEC is about 40 odd people, a wide cross section of representing a wide cross section of our stakeholders. Yes. And also people with very different politics across that, on a spectrum of politics. So he can't come there and expect that if he says something, everybody's going to blindly follow it. Yes. That's not how it works. Yeah. But when he's very clear about what his view is and where he thinks we should be, people do take note of that.
The greatest challenge he will have when coming into become Prime Minister, if he is to be elected, is he will be a wartime leader straight away. You got the Ukraine-Russia war. You've got the Isreal-Hamas conflict that's going on there. Do you think he's got the character and ability to deal with very stressful, demanding scenarios on day one?
I do, and I think so. He'd been very clear on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He'd been out to Ukraine, visited our forces on the front line there. He's he's spoken about this. He's very clear where his position is on that. In support of NATO and our nuclear defence, in support of that. He's been very clear on all those things. Even on the Hamas-Israel conflict as well. He's been very clear on that as well. Yeah. So when you listen to what he says, he's very clear. He wants a ceasefire. He wants to be sure that everything Israel's doing is in line with international law. He wants to make sure that the borders are opened up so that more relief can be provided quicker. He's very clear on all those things. But I think there's one other thing which has stood out for me about what Keir Starmer has said about that conflict, and that is about the need for a peace process to deliver a two-state solution. Part of the reason within this challenging phase at the moment is because there hasn't been any effective peace process in the last 20, 25 years.
Yeah, of course.
And in the absence of that peace process, people have just gone away, and Netanyahu is not, he's the Prime Minister of Israel, but he's not, he's not somebody I see who wants peace with Palestinians. Yeah, and you've got Hamas. Hamas doesn't want peace. Yeah, so you've got bad faith players, and in the absence of the international community pulling them into a peace process, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to do what they're doing. So it does need a peace process, and the one thing I have been struck by is when he has spoken on this, the need for a peace process, and I see that's where he will see he can make a real difference with the international community pulling some kind of peace process together and pulling the partners into that to try and deliver a two-state solution.
Could we explore that then? So how, if the Labour Party is very concerned about this, how would Keir Starmer achieve a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine?
Well, it's you've got to have a peace process. You've got to bring people around a table to talk. Now, Hamas and Israel are in conflict, but there are talks going on through channels about releasing hostages and ceasefire and stuff. So it's not impossible to achieve, but firstly, it's about setting out and getting wider acceptance of the two-state solution.
Outside of, Israel and Hamas.
Yeah, and it's getting the international community on board with that, and then getting players within Israel and the Palestinian community on that side as well. And then, so the end solution has to be I can't see any other solution that's going to bring peace to that region.
Would that be, do you think, a mission for a Labour government to?
I think Keir will see that is something. The stuff I've seen, I think he will see that that's something a Labour government can make a real difference in pushing the international community in that direction, to pulling that peace process together. And it needs that, because in the absence of that, you're not going to make any progress forward.
I want to also talk about Labour and anti-Semitism, which we did touch on before. A lot of Labour Party members are actually pro-Palestinian and hold a very legitimate view that Palestine is part of their indigenous land, and there are encroachment of it, and they have rights to it. Yeah, and also the Labour Party has a big Muslim vote. I understand you said Keir Starmer said he wanted a ceasefire, but from my understanding, it had taken him some time to call for a ceasefire, and he's now describing it as a humanitarian ceasefire. I think many people outside the Labour Party members, see that they're very fixated on this issue, on Israel-Palestine. I don't know if it necessarily translates into votes. I think maybe in Muslim constituencies, but there aren't too many Muslim constituencies. There are a decent number, of course. You've got two sides. One is, wanting to support Palestinian rights, but then the other side is, of course, anti-Semitic, hate is outside the Labour Party, should not exist in there. But then you've got that middle ground where a lot of Labour Party members talk about, very passionate about, which is challenging the state of Israel, challenging Netanyahu. Do you think in that debate, some people do fall into anti-Semitism? I guess, how does Labour Party deal with this issue that it's really only fixated on the left? How do you come forward and actually appear like a unified party from this long debate?
I said earlier, the Labour Party is a reflection of wider society. And one thing we see is every time something bubbles up between Israel and Palestine, you get a spike of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in the UK, and we saw that in the Labour Party in our complaints as well. So, after October the 7th, we saw a massive spike. We were on a downward trajectory prior to that in terms of number of complaints. The proportion of our total complaints that were anti-Semitism has always been really high, something like 40-45%, whatever it was, and that was on a downward trajectory as well, which is a good sign. And then all of a sudden, October the 7th happened, and then anti-Semitism complaints rocketed, but we also started getting a lot of Islamophobia complaints as well, which we didn't previously. And so that in the early months that happened, that scaled back again now. It's gone back to a bit more like normal, or a bit more like previous to October the 7th. It's reflective of wider society, and the challenge for us is to deal with that effectively, robustly, and in a timely fashion. And we spoke about earlier, we've got those processes in place, and we're doing that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's also about having people having the confidence to submit complaint in the first place. And this is the thing, been said to us, there's massive amount of Islamophobia in the Labour Party. Well, we don't see that in the complaints. And my advice is, well, if it's there, you need to put a complaint in, and we'll deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the one part of it. The other part of this is, we've got our codes of conduct, we've got our rule book, we've got our complaint processes, and that can be very technical. And it's about, well, this behaviour fits into that doesn't. But I think you need to also take a slight step back as well, in the sense that I was born and brought up in Smethwick, and I'd lived all my life here. I went away for university, came back here, work here, live here, and yet there's no Jewish community around here.
Yeah.
Of any numbers.
Yeah.
So my first experience of the Jewish community, of Jewish people, was when I went to university. And that was my first experience or understanding or knowledge of anti-Semitism. Yeah. So not everybody has a good understanding of what anti-Semitism is, or even of what Islamophobia is, or other forms of discrimination, until you experience it, until you actually see it, or see have come across something that gives you that experience or that knowledge. Yeah. So there is something to be said. So the anti-Semitism training that JLM, Jewish Labour Movement, provides is really valuable.
Yes.
Yeah. Because what it does, it gives you a basic understanding of what is anti-Semitism. Now, if somebody hasn't been on that anti-Semitism training or any anti-Semitism training, and they have no experience of the Jewish community, no interaction and stuff, then their experiences are going to be very limited. Yeah. But if you've been through some kind of training, and or you live in an area where there's a large Jewish population, you will have your experience will be very different.
Yes.
Yeah. And your understanding will be very different. And part of the challenge for us is, okay, so how do we improve that knowledge and understanding? And this isn't just a challenge in relation to anti-Semitism in the Jewish community, but it's a challenge in relation to all of our communities, and not just community, but other equality strands as well. Yeah. But it's not just a challenge in terms of Labour Party; it's about wider society as well. So things like religious literacy, things like that better understanding of different communities is important on a societal basis, not just a Labour Party basis.
So when there was an issue of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, which you have, addressed through your various policies, but it's not necessarily been brought up in other parties, that issue. I only say, is it unique to the Labour Party because it's generally a pro-Palestine party, or supporting, Palestinian rights. Is that a unique challenge of the Labour Party? Would it ever go away in the Labour Party?
No, it's not. It's not a unique challenge to the Labour Party. Okay. There are some people who there is evidence to suggest that there are people who have been expelled or left the Labour Party because of anti-Semitism joining the Green Party. Yeah, in numbers.
Yes.
Now that will be a problem for the Green Party in due course. There are people in some of our far left parties who are anti-Semitic. Yeah. The Conservative Party has a big problem with Islamophobia and does nothing about it. Yeah, the Reform has a major problem.
Yes.
Around Islamophobia. Yeah. So it's not unique. There was a unique set of circumstances in the Labour Party after 2015, that led to, culminated the EHRC report and led to the actions we took. But the existence of discrimination and racism isn't unique to the Labour Party. It's across different, and there's something to be said about the way the EHRC addressed anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. There's something to be said for that to happen more broadly in relation to other parties and other forms of discrimination as well.
Right. Another significant role that you play, Gurinder, is you are a leader within Labour to Win and the Labour First movement. And part of your role is promoting, whether that's social democratic policies or moderate policies or creating that moderate movement. There are many socialists or people who believe in socialism in the Labour Party. What role does socialism play in the Labour Party? Should it be extinct? Does it have a place? Or what is that, unifying goal?
Yeah, so the Labour Party has always been a broad church, and broad church in different ways. Broad church in the sense that we're structurally, we've got our individual members, we've got affiliate socialist society, trade union, so we have a federal structure. We've got a structure which had different component parts to it. It's a broad church in terms of people with different views on policy issues who sit on a range across the spectrum. There's always been a tension within the Labour Party from pretty much when it was set up on the nature of the Labour Party. What kind of party is it? And that. So when the Labour Party was first set up, Clause 1 of the rule book clearly defined that the Labour Party there exists to maintain a presence, a democratically elected presence in Parliament.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's always been a democratic party, and there are people who on the revolutionary socialist fringe who have always not been part of the Labour Party simply because their values and their approach does not align with the Labour Party. Yeah, and essentially, ultimately, if you follow it through, that's the reason, or that's one of the reasons why why we've prescribed some organisations in the last few years. Yeah, so that tension has always existed. Yeah, but the party has always had a healthy balance internally of people across that spectrum, and I know that there are people in my CLP who have left-wing views, much more left-wing views than I do, who in our CLP meeting we will disagree on a whole raft of stuff, but when we go campaigning, we'll go campaigning. When there's an election to win, we'll all be out campaigning.
Because they're democratic.
They're democratic.
So does socialism have some place?
Socialism does have a place on that broad church. Absolutely it does, yeah. But when I first stood for the NEC in 2017, and from my first time standing, I've always said I'm standing in defence of the broad church, yeah. But I would qualify that further. I'm standing in defence of a broad church that is clearly balanced in favour of Clause 1 of the rule book.
Which is the democratic control of government. Okay. And you feel maybe some people who are on the hard left, militants, revolutionary socialists, they are actually there for ideological purposes.
They're not fellow travellers in that sense, in terms of that Clause 1 of the rule book. And in which case they do not belong in the Labour Party. Yeah. Now the Labour Party is a political party, is a tool to organise and maintain and get people elected around a common platform, around those values. It's not a protest group, it's not a debating society. It has a real purpose in that sense. Yeah. And we have to keep that focus, and we have to organise around that.
Okay. All right. I would not have brought you here if I didn't find you impressive, Gurinder, or shall I say Gurinder CBE, because of your services to politics. Where did you get your values in yourself, and how has that shaped the life that you've lived?
I mean, I think mainly, I would say from my family. So, my family's always been very. So my grandfather came to the UK in 1956, settled here. My dad came 2 years later when he was 10 years old, and my grandmother came then as well. My mum came several years later. My dad was educated here. Most of his education was here. Went on to become an engineer with the post office, or with British Telecom, but back then was called the post office. And he was very involved in the union there, which went on to become the Communication Workers Union, CWU. And after that, he joined the Labour Party. And I remember from a very young age going out, leafleting, and when they were going out canvassing and doing elections and stuff, going out, when just very young. And I joined the Labour Party when I was 16. My 16th birthday present was a membership application form. And so I think that makes me 35 years a Labour Party member. And all my family are Labour Party members. My mum must be approaching 50 years membership now.
Incredible.
And my wife, my kids, my brothers, all members. And I'm active in Unite and the GMB, because trade unions are important. And it's that affinity to the Labour Party came from my dad and my family. The values of equality, social justice, some of that comes from my Sikh upbringing.
Okay.
My religious upbringing defines some of that. Standing up for people who who are deprived or in other circumstances, that comes from a Sikh upbringing as well. The ability to devote this much time to it, again, come from a family, because we have a family business. My dad and my uncle set up a plumbers merchant on Smethwick High Street in 1975. My brothers and I run it now. They do more of the running than I do, and I'm therefore able to spend time on the Labour Party stuff and other stuff. So again, that comes from the family as well. And it's those values are, some of those values are just timeless, and so when I stood for the NEC first time in 2017, and the reason I stood was because the direction that was being pursued then, to me, felt that this Labour Party wouldn't exist as an electoral force in a few more years if people like me didn't act. And that's why I thought I had to stand for the NEC. Somebody had to do it, so I stood for the NEC, and was backed by Labour First and Progress at the time, and then eventually went on to form Labour to Win. And that platform is very much, it's about bringing people together who are focused on the challenge of maintaining and winning, maintaining a Labour Party that's capable of winning elections and going out and fighting winning elections.
You have a family business, but you also commit many hours to Labour Party work, a lot of it for free, but because of these values of Sikhism, of equality, fairness, standing up for people that may not be able to stand up for themselves. What advice do you have for people listening on how to live that purposeful life, or how to justify living such a busy life, but for the pursuit of good and moral values? Because I find that challenging, because I'm working as a doctor, but then also doing other extracurricular things, and then even like myself, I'm applying for surgery, and I feel at times selfish that I'm committing myself to working on this one particular thing, but then I somewhat justify that I'm working to get this greater skill to help people. What advice do you have for people listening?
So look, what we do is a righteous thing. it's a good thing we do. Yeah, we live in a democratic society. If people like us don't come forward and participate in that process, it'll be very one-dimensional. Yeah, it's and this kind of the question we were talking about earlier is this thing about people in the Labour Party not thinking that we should be the default party of government. It kind of comes back to this. This does take time and commitment. Yeah, and and to give time and commitment to this, you have to take it away from other things. So it might be your work time you could be spending on gainful earning, time spent with family, etc. But what I see when I first stood for the NEC, first couple of times I went around and spoke at a few CLPs, and one thing I used to do was I used to ask people to put their hands up if they're a councillor, and I'd say keep your hand up and put your hand up if you're a school governor, if you're a charity trustee, if you volunteered at a food bank, if you or a sports club or a youth club or a faith organisation. Yeah. And after about 6 or 7 of those questions, pretty much most of the hands will be in the air.
Yeah.
And what that says to me, the Labour Party is full of people who are running civic society in their areas, but also doing everything they possibly can to make things better for their communities. And that is what the Labour Party is. And these people come together in the Labour Party because they see the Labour Party as the vehicle to help them make even more progress in their pursuit for their community. Yeah. So the Labour Party, that's what we are. That's what we are. And to
represent the small voice. To
represent the voice, but also to make that difference.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's that's what we're doing. It's if you're the school governor, you're making a difference in that school. Yeah. If you're involved in a faith organisation volunteering, you're making a difference there. If you're volunteering at a food bank, you're making a difference to the people who need that food bank. Yeah. And what the Labour Party does is brings those people so most people don't join I don't believe most people join the Labour Party because they're ideologically driven in a particular direction. I think they join the Labour Party because they see this as a vehicle that's going to improve things for their communities and help them improve things for their community, because they're already engaged in that way in the first place. So what we're doing is very righteous, yeah, but it is challenging because you do have to make time for it, and it's not easy, and it's a balance you have to create. You the number of people who we know, we all know people in the Labour Party who give so much time and effort, and that it's most of the stuff the Labour Party does is on the back of volunteers. It's everything I do is in a voluntary capacity.
How do you feel? You're a very prominent figure. You're I see Sikhs for Labour at every by-election campaign. I see you posting on Twitter. They're fully integrated and active members of the Labour Party. How do you feel being a very prominent member, part of the Sikh community, that actually representing lots of Sikh members who are Labour members as well as non-Labour members, as an Asian person on, one of the largest, the largest party in the UK, and then as well needing to represent the small voice, the working class person? Do you feel that pressure, or how do you feel humbled by that opportunity that you're placed in?
Yeah, you do. Being elected to the NEC was a real honour. Yeah, and as part of that, I've been involved in so much of that change we talked about. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to chair conference, which is a real privilege. And being on those platforms, being stood alongside some of those people, it is a real honour. Yeah. But in terms of what the stuff I do, yes, it's on the NECs at that level, but there are countless numbers of people in our party who are committing the same time, the same effort at every level of the party, and we don't exist without any of that. You know, if you're CLP secretary, if you're CLP officer, branch officer, you know, if you're out there giving your Saturday every week to the Labour Party campaigning, etc., you know, we don't exist without any of that.
My final question is trust in politics. That's a very topical thing that people are talking about, not just necessarily distrust in the Conservative Party, but just generally in politicians and making policies. I also want to talk about maybe the toxic culture in political debate. It almost seems we live in a very divided world where the left think the right is racist or, you know, outside of society, but then you got the right complaining of the left of being very woke, and just young people just, you know, campaigning or, you know, going through debates. In this general election, how does Labour, or how should we go about having debates, but then still coming together at the end of the day?
No, absolutely. And traditionally we've done that well in the Labour Party. Like I said before, you know, we've had I don't know how many meetings I've been to over the years, Labour Party meetings, where I've had real disagreements with people, but actually afterwards we might go for a meal together, might go campaigning together, whatever. You know, you get on. And we lost a bit of that after 2015. I think it's coming back again now. I think the state of public debate out there is really toxic, and particularly for women, and particularly for women from ethnic minority backgrounds. And you know, we all have to hold ourselves up as doing the right thing all the time. And sometimes people do make mistakes, but actually saying sorry, apologising, moving on, and correcting that as soon as you can. It's about being mindful of your language that you use. It's about being mindful of the things you say. You know, sometimes, but it's also about the understanding that, you know, we're all, people might have different political views, but actually we've all got to live together. Yeah. You know, we all, you know, my neighbours on this road, you know, I don't know what all their political views are, but we all live here. You know, there's a park opposite my house. I don't know all the people there, what their political views are, but if I go in the park, you know, people get on along with each other. And it's not hard to do, but it's that understanding that actually we lost badly in 2019, but it was a democratic election, yeah, and people didn't. We weren't able to convince people to vote for us in the numbers we needed. That's not a fault of those people. That's our fault.
But do you think this can also be translated in the national debate? You will be actively campaigning against the Conservative Party.
I think it's down to every individual.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's down to, so yeah. I'm also chair of, you know, Hope Not Hate Charitable Trust, and one thing which Hope Not Hate, the limited company, does is they do call out people who do hateful campaigning or use hateful rhetoric and stuff, and they do that on a regular basis. And what they do is they publish, they say what their red lines are. These are our red lines. If you cross them, we're going to call you back out, whatever party you are. And that's what they do. So, you know, we have to call it out where it happens. We have to be mindful of our own actions, yeah, and ultimately change starts, you know, from yourself.
Gurinder, I'm incredibly humbled for the opportunity for this conversation. I know I asked you, how would you describe Keir Starmer, but I would describe you as humble, honest, extremely hardworking, and I see you always bouncing or juggling lots of balls, and that's something that I would hope to have that ability to do. I think in this longer form conversation, I've tried to pull it out of you and maybe even compliment yourself, but I understand that's maybe not necessarily your character, but a lot of people do look up to you and the roles that you play within Labour as well as just generally in society. So thank you for your time today, and look forward to further conversations.
Thank you. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
I would like to finish with the words from the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Gordon Brown. When the strong help the weak, it makes us all stronger. Thank you for listening to the Second Opinion podcast. Please like and subscribe and check out our other channels. See you next time.